Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Talking Shit About. I'm your host, Elizabeth Weberman, and each month I bring on a guest to talk about something they love, something they hate, something they've been through, or something they just know a lot about, and hopefully by the end we've all learned something. This is a topic I have wanted to cover since the beginning of the podcast, since before the beginning of the podcast, but I wanted to find the right guest. So I started this podcast when I was coming down from my manic episode in 2020, which involved psychosis and severe agoraphobia and just all sorts of shit that a lot of people were dealing with during COVID, but because of my bipolar 1, it was just so fucking overwhelming and my brain literally couldn't handle it. But over the past few years, I've started as a peer support specialist and I've gained a lot more tools in managing my own mental illness as well as supporting other people who are experiencing similar things. And it's a really fucking cool position to be in. And through this peer support work, I discovered the book, The Bipolar Game Changer by Andrea Grey, who is our guest for today. And the book just blew my mind. My copy is just highlighted and there are notes everywhere, dog ears. It's a beautiful manic piece of art. And I also have a notebook that you will hear me flipping through where I wrote down like 12 pages of quotes that I just wanted to make sure that I had handy if and when I need them. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Andrea. As I was editing the episode, I had a moment where I was like, I really wish I had a clip of somebody in Mania to give an example of sort of what that sounds like. And I went, oh shit, I do have that. So in 2012, my dad experienced a very severe manic episode. He was also diagnosed bipolar 1, and his mental health rapidly declined. He left me this voicemail, and at the time, I wasn't diagnosed. I didn't know anything about bipolar, and the voicemail was funny to me because the things that he was saying sounded so ridiculous. And then shortly after that, the voicemails turned into severe paranoia of somebody's taken all of my stuff, somebody's out to get me, they're gonna come get you, you need to like flee the country. And it became really scary. And so from across the country, we called the police to do a welfare check, and he was involuntarily hospitalized, and that created a lot of tension. And in that period, I didn't talk to him because I didn't know how to communicate with him. I didn't have any of the tools or knowledge that I have now. And in 2012, towards the end of it, he had sent me an email that was, hey, I'm better now. And probably my biggest life regret is not responding to that email. I couldn't tell you why I didn't. I think discomfort of the unknown. But in February of 2013, he died by suicide, as I talked about in episode, I believe, 46 about suicide with Amanda Ferret. So obviously this topic is extremely personal to me. It is very important to me, not just for my life, but in helping other people navigate this fucked up world and the fucked up shit our brains do to ourselves. So after the interview, I will be playing that voicemail for you. It's actually a song that my friends with Subtower Records helped me put together. It's an album inspired by my mania and depression in 2020, and the song An Ode for Those in Need has audio that is my dad's voicemail. So I'm going to play that at the end of the episode, so for right now we can focus on Andrea and all of the cool ass shit she has to say. I will have links to all of her cool things in the show notes, and with that, this is a long intro. Let's go ahead and talk some shit. Just kidding, one more thing before we start. Thank you so much, Cece, for being a Patreon subscriber. It turns out she has been on the Patreon since the beginning, so shout out to Cece. She is in episode, I want to say 8, about art school. Go check that out. And okay, now we'll get into the interview.
I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I have friends that are firefighters and I know that they use soap.
and she was screaming at me over soup.
Fuck this, I am not ever talking to a Scientologist again. These people are all insane.
I'm putting my bricks in the dumpsters, motherfuckers. Do you see me, bitches? I'm throwing my bricks. And he's just like chucking bricks.
I am here today with Andrea Grey, who I know as the author of the Bipolar Game Changer. Andrea, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited for this conversation. I reached out on a whim and was kind of like, I don't know if I'll hear back, maybe. And then your response just blew me away. It was so nice and sweet. So I'm really glad to have you here. And I'm sure there's more to you than just being the author of the Bipolar Game Changer. So I will give you space to introduce yourself and share just anything you want people to know about you.
Well, I am living in Canada. I'm 43, and I studied biology in university. I have a degree in that. And I had a lot of physical health challenges in my 20s, and then that turned into so-called mental health challenges in my late 20s and my 30s. And so it's been a bit of a journey, but I have appreciated learning along the way. And other than that, I really enjoy rollerblading. I wish I would get out and do it more. Looking forward to this year when the weather changes, getting out there. And yeah.
Awesome. That is always the hardest question for people. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
I don't have to answer it. So let's talk a little bit about bipolar. First off, it'd be easy to read off the DSM criteria, but I'd like to hear your personal definition of what bipolar disorder is.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that my definition of bipolar disorder has changed over time. And even today, I could say it one way and then tomorrow come up with a totally different answer. So for today, bipolar disorder for me is something that is really undefined. So it's a state or states that happen where it's me being faced with the unknown, things that I don't know, and maybe chaos and uncertainty, which is a different experience than, say, a regular state of consciousness. And for me, now I see it as something that I can continuously learn from. So there's always new information coming through, and whenever it happens to come through, and I can always learn from it, rather than, say, an experience of fearing these strange things that are happening, or new things, or spontaneous things, or out of the blue, or things that don't feel like they come from myself and from within my own control. That's kind of a definition right now. And for me, one of the hardest things actually to do is to define something because everything seems to be expanding. So even the process of defining something is trying to reduce it down to something very simple, when to me it's complex. And so understanding some of those processes involved in the complexity is what's fun for me.
So one of the reasons why I really resonated with your book is you talk a lot about mania, which is someone diagnosed bipolar 1. I have experienced. I'm wondering if you could kind of you kind of sort of already did, but kind of what is mania and what that might look like.
Sure, and thanks for bringing that up and jogging my memory, because that's actually very helpful for me. Yes, I did write a lot about mania. The book was, I would guess, from the perspective of mania, at least for myself. So the way it's written, it's like the voice of mania, or perhaps my voice of mania at least, which might resonate with other people's voice of mania, or how information comes through and is spoken out in words, for example. And it's not the only example of what could be written from the voice of mania, but basically what I sensed was there's not really much in the literature out there written from the perspective of mania. Like giving mania itself a voice. And so that was the purpose. And so to get to what is mania, in simplest terms, I see mania as energy, right? So usually it is a state of heightened energy. And then that energy happens to generate more experiences from, say, staying awake longer. Well, if I'm awake 20 hours of the day, I'm going to have more experiences than I'm awake 18, right? That just makes sense. Or if I have lots of energy, even in my normal state, I'm going to go do things that I wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have energy. So all of a sudden, the actions, the behaviors, the ideas, the information, and what is meaningful radically changes. So there's so much to it, and I wrote that book about it. And lots of what I write and I experience in daily life now is actually informed by what I experienced originally only in a manic state. And that's kind of what I've gone about doing, is bringing these traits and these, maybe some of them are gifts, into daily life, rather than being like, okay, well, I can only do that in mania, or I have to wait for mania for that to happen. So it's really an information rich and meaning rich state. And of course, there's negative sides to it too. And I can't speak to everyone's experiences of mania, but I feel like the good parts are thrown out with the bad parts. And so making that distinction is important to me. And I think increasing the literature about manic experiences beyond just kind of the stereotypical scenarios that you might see of somebody in mania in a movie, for example, or perhaps in some like memoirs and stuff. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying we're missing more. There's more to the story. And even if you look at the questionnaire, I don't know if they use it in every psych ward per se, but when they're trying to discover if somebody's in the manic state, it's just like, is exceedingly happy, talks a lot, So when a clinician, for example, experiences somebody in the manic state, they're looking for very few indicators that they're in mania, but those are the whole state is reduced down to those few indicators to hopefully capture somebody and put them through the psych system. I'm not saying that's wrong either. I'm just saying that when we expand all of that and talk about all the subtleties and the nuance and the meaning and the synchronicities of the experiences, then a vast territory of context, or at least a vast map of context, starts to build bridges to the territory of mania that we're experiencing.
One of the concepts in your book that I love is I think you call it like a fun house or something like that.
Oh, Glad Park?
What was it?
Glad Park?
Glad Park, yes. This idea of a space where people experiencing mania can go and, feed off the positive energy of each other and be productive and be in that space without being, shackled, or whether that be physically or with medication. So yeah, I think that's a really cool idea, because yeah, part of it too of mania, it feels really alienating. I don't know if you feel the same way, but in like your book, like I'm just going to go ahead and quote you real quick.
Please.
So they can think that we don't make sense, but what we are saying has subjective meaning to us. Everything feels meaningful because we can't discern what is more or less important, and that's precisely why we can see meaning everywhere. I highlighted a lot of quotes. I was like going through and like highlighting quotes, and I realized I was highlighting everything. But I really like that one because, from the outside, things might not make sense. It's like, how did you get from the letter A to the number X, or the number X, the number 5,
No, that's a
whereas
good
most
one,
people would go
actually.
A, B, C, right? But in your head, you have all of this logic, and, your reality is just, it's reality, it's just different. And your logic is there, it's just different. And so I know when I was experiencing mania, that was really hard for me, like, to explain the things that I saw, or like, I know for me, I go on like social justice tirades when I'm manic. And I'm just like, why can't you all see that this band is the devil? And not really the devil, but just kind of an exaggeration. But yeah, Does that resonate with you at all?
Definitely. My mind is extrapolating a lot. Yeah, you bring up the point that the mind, brain, and consciousness are working differently. And yeah, I haven't felt isolated with it in a long time because of the process I created for myself, which I ended up calling re-uncovery, and we could talk about that. But in the beginning, it was isolating. Actually, the very first episode I had in 2011, it had lasted about 2 months, and this was before I was diagnosed and all of that. And I was manic and I had psychosis as well at some points. And in the end, it was mostly psychosis. And when I was taken to the hospital, the nurse was kind of interrogating me, like, what's going on? Because I just kind of wouldn't speak. And it's because I was trying to say certain things for months and like it wasn't being received, right? And so what I wanted to say, but I didn't say was we were killing ourselves with our thoughts, feelings, and actions, you know. But I just felt so isolated. I couldn't say it. I could see it, but I was just totally dejected. But luckily, you know, for me in my journey, I ended up going to supported housing and I decided to go through the recovery journey and just kind of have fun with it. So I wasn't actually isolated because like I literally was living with people and they all had mental health concerns. So I wasn't. And then when the information came back, like you give the example of social, like going on a tirade or something, I kind of learned to keep it to myself, like to make notes to myself in my iPhone, like in the Notepad app or in notebooks. I have a banker's box full of old notebooks, but I eventually started mostly writing in sticky notes and my computer. But for me, I realized that just the act of writing something down was already manifesting that idea or insight or intuition or piece of information that wanted to come through. And back to that point of not making a discernment about what's more important or not, you know, I kind of write down almost everything that comes through in the form that can be written down. I don't say, oh, no, I'm not going to write that one down. And I think this one, that way I keep the channel open. And by kind of refining this process for myself, I have a relationship with that information in daily life. Like this morning, I probably wrote down 10 sticky notes. And I also started the process, which I talk about in the book, of self-dialogue, which I was talking with myself on my phone. And then that allowed me to talk about the things I had written down in a notebook during the day. And then I would talk about them. And when I started to talk, I would expand upon them, just like you sharing now is allowing me to expand upon things as well. And then I'd watch it. And if anything came through that was a new insight from that, I would write that down. And then I would, the next day or whatever day, any new insights I'd written down, plus the ones I'd kind of harvested from listening to myself, I'd write them down. And so it was like a very generative process of capturing and harvesting these memes or meanings and engaging with them in a process that was completely private. And, you know, I did that kind of out of desperation, which we can talk about that later, but it turned into a very helpful process for me to engage with this meaning and not feel isolated. Actually, I noticed that a lot of times I'd talk about stuff, and if I ever clicked back to listen to something, which I rarely did, it was funny because the thing that I was talking about at that moment is exactly what was happening at that time in the future. So I realized by speaking about these things, I was actually partially participating in creating my reality. Had I never looked back, I wouldn't know that, but it was just kind of obvious. So I don't tend to look back because there's just too much of it. I did that for 700 hours. And like you said, like isolation, like 700 hours of therapy, that's like a lot of money, right? And it wasn't therapy per se, but it was a way to speak these out loud. Just like in Mania, when we want to go on tirades or speak things out loud and it's not heard, but like the phone recording is totally, it doesn't care, right? But it actually helps me care about myself. And it was super helpful. And I'm actually doing a different process now with AI, actually.
I love that you shared that. Thank you so much. Because I always love giving our listeners, new tools to use and myself. So I do want to get to unrecovery or re-unrecovery, but while we're on the topic of thoughts, another thing that you wrote that really resonated with me was the line, "We are not our thoughts," but that 95% of thoughts are repetitive and 80% are negative. Repetitive thoughts are the opposite of special messages, and they are unspecial messages. So that's something I've dealt with a lot, especially coming out of Mania, was just cycling thoughts and these repetitive negative thoughts, and I just like could not get out of my head. And then I read that and I was like, oh. And so I started realizing that when I have a thought and I'm just ruminating over and over, I'm like, okay, hold up. Is this a repetitive thought? Yes. I don't know if it's the healthiest method, but I visualize putting it in a box and then it goes away for a bit. But even just the awareness of like, is usually something to do with like work. Like, oh, I messed this thing up. Now I'm going to get fired. Everybody's going to hate me. And I would just go in these circles and there was no evidence to support any of those thoughts I was having. But even just being able to recognize that like, okay, yes, this is something that's bothering me, but going over it again and again and again in my brain is not going to change anything. I'm not gonna feel better by doing this. So that was something that was really helpful for me.
Thanks for sharing that because it's such a tough thing, thoughts, right? It's the biggest challenge, really. And I talked about thought a bit in the book. I kind of designated a whole chapter to it. And I had a friend read over the book before I put it out there, self-published it. And she's like, I don't know if I resonate with this chapter. And I was like, I'm just going to put it in there anyway, because it's just like an introduction to basically when I read The Power of Now, it changed my life. And that was in my early to mid 20s. And I shared the story in the book where I was reading The Power of Now, and Eckhart Tolle said, say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be.
Yes.
Like that. And I did it. I stopped, I put the book down, I asked myself in my mind that, and all of a sudden there was no thinking, and then I realized like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to keep going on. So for me, it's a tough thing because there's a lot out there, especially in mental health circles, and I haven't experienced it myself because it doesn't work for me, like say CBT CBT, where it's like change your thoughts, right? Whereas for me, by doing the practicing of the power of now, it actually helped me not have any thoughts in my head at all. So I know that it's possible. And, there's so much out there about having a silent mind, or many books have been written about silent mind. So I don't consider myself the go-to person on that topic, but I just wanted to put it out there, especially for people like me with a diagnosis, that thoughts can also be minimized rather than just changed.
I'm so glad you brought up I wonder what my next thought will be, because I read that and I used that, and it's a great tool. And I'm so glad you kept that section in there, because if it didn't help anybody else, it at least helped me. So earlier you mentioned re-unrecovery. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
It's actually spelled now I don't even know, because that makes sense too. Re-uncovery.
Re-uncovery.
Yeah, so it's like recovery, but there's an "un" in the middle. Re-uncovery. That word came to me, if I look back at my self-dialogue videos, I think I found where I first mentioned it in researching to do a presentation. So I was doing a presentation for ISPS, International Society for Psychological Approaches to Psychosis. I was going to do an online presentation, and that really helped me to turn what I've been doing for myself into a bit of a modality or a tool. or a system. And so I discovered the word re-uncovery that I had created a long time ago. So I created the word for the system, which I hadn't created the system yet. And by going through the process that I was doing, it became clear that there was a framework that could be applied to it so that others might find it useful. So the word re-uncovery is kind of a play on recovery, because I remember saying to myself, I didn't like the word recovery because it's saying recover over to me, recover, right? So I had all these experiences in so-called mania and psychosis, and in order to recover, I had to cover over those things, whether it's with medications or say even CBT, which I didn't do, or whatever programs, in order to participate back into society and be included in society, right? Which, that's important, but it's not the whole story. So then I created the word re-uncovery to mean in extraordinary states of consciousness, mania, psychosis, whatever, a ton of stuff gets uncovered. And I have the evidence for myself. I have notebooks full of writing. I uncovered that. But if I just put it in a box and never look at it again, because I'm told that if I do, I have no insight into my illness, and it's all illness and it's all meaningless, then, that didn't work for me. I never did that. But to go back and, even in a state of mania, writing all this information, when I'm later in a sort of regular state of speed, go back and uncover it again. So that's where re-uncovery comes through. So without babbling on about it, it's like the state uncovers information, meaning ways of being, traits, behaviors, possibilities, and then the state ends. Mania ends. It doesn't go on forever. It actually can't. It's very resource intensive for the body, even biologically. So then after it's over, going back and having a look, and writing things down with the intention that I'm going to go back and have a look later. And how this helped me too was that instead of mania being the state where I have these ideas and I go frolic about in society and tell people and wander around, I write them down and I look at them later after. So that keeps me kind of safe from things I might do in mania. And it's more like a sacred state where I'm uncovering in mania or heightened energy. For me, it doesn't even feel like mania at all. And then going back when it's no longer a big download of information coming through and having a look. And, doing the process of speaking them out or making blog posts or just writing or however one wants to integrate.
That brings me to another thing I wanted to cover was like the illness or psychiatric perspective of like mania and mental illness. Let me see if I've got a good quote for this. I'm sure I do. So the mental health system discourages us from philosophizing about our experiences. We're disqualified from using certain phrases as soon as we are labeled bipolar, saying things like, I am an eternal, infinite possibilities living in heaven on earth, are a sign of illness. Yet many religions and New Age spiritualities insist the above claims to be true.
Well, where my mind immediately goes, and then if you want to bring in your question again, is how, well, even for religion, for example, I was just talking about this with AI the other day, where the Bible says something to the effect that Jesus said, this and more you will do, like regarding miracles and the things he was able to do. But then what happens to the people who actually do them? Even if it's somebody in a so-called manic state that has some of those miracles, almost magic, mystical, synchronicity things happening, right? And I made a meme one time, and it was Jesus saying that quote, the proper quote, and then it says, this and more you will do, or whatever, and then you'll go to the psych ward. Because, they don't want people, society wants believers and followers. They don't want people who really embody these possibilities. And the whole system is designed to capture the people that start to do it. And there's nothing wrong with helping somebody at the end of a manic state, and maybe it's turned into psychosis, or maybe the person is super spent, and all the things that happen. The trouble starts when they say, if you revisit any of that possibility, like imagining that you're an eternal being of light, then it's illness, right? Whereas, for example, somebody, I'm just making something up, but imagine there's somebody who is an empty nester, and then they're like, what's the meaning of life? And they start to pursue human potential, and then they go to all these workshops, and then, slowly by like step by step, they're attempting to feel like they're an eternal being of light. Well, that's okay, right? Because they're doing it slowly from this pattern that has been laid out, and like workshops in the economy and the structure of the commercial society, but people who get thrust into it non-volitionally, like all of a sudden somebody is thrust into a high energy state out of nowhere. That's what society doesn't like. Where did this come from? How did this happen? And then they just call it all mental illness. Well, there's many ways that it could happen, but the point is that it happens and it's happening. And what do we do with that? Yeah, I think those states have been commercialized and spoon-fed to people to go step by step towards that, right? And then there's a whole subset of people who just get immersed in it through the design of the universe, but those people are called ill, right? And if the people that had this happen naturally, sort of, I'll just call it natural for now, without their own will making it happen, those people are demonized or oppressed or numbed out or medicated. Because the thing is, if the people who went through it naturally were able to really flower into it, then there would be no market for the other. That's how I kind of see it, partly. Like imagine if hundreds of years ago, well, back to the ancient Greeks called it divine mania and actually revered it and had those people nearby to give messages and things like that. And then somehow that got lost. But if that had continued throughout the whole of society, obviously today would be completely different. That's just one example. But I don't think I really answered your question. I went on a
No,
tangent.
you did. That was perfect. Nailed it. Kind of switching gears here. I was wondering if there are any like myths or misconceptions about bipolar or mania that come to mind that you'd like to squash while you're on here.
Yeah, there are a bunch of myths that I've at least squashed for myself, and my wish would be for others to do so as well, because to not be able to squash these myths leads to a lot of suffering. For example, one of the myths is the more episodes that you have, the more medications you need to be on, or the more you're going to have cognitive decline, many things. So they really put this fear into having more episodes of mania, which is unfortunate in a way because it's pretty hard to not have another one, right? So then if you're already set up to fear it, the trouble with fear is that when we're in a fearful state and there's a lot of cortisol in the body, we actually can't learn. So by having these myths, it naturally puts our brain in a state where we're not going to be able to learn from the experience, even when it inevitably happens. So there's that, right? And so I say that's a myth for me because I've had at least 10, 12 episodes. I've lost count, but I am just as bright as I was before, if not, well, I don't know if I'm bright per se, but like my ability to generate meaning and embody and have access to the things that I have access to in mania only before in daily life is quite high. And that brings a lot of meaning into my life to the point where, the mundane things of life I can deal with a lot better because there's so much meaning. There's so much meaning. Like if you saw my desk, it's covered in sticky notes with sticky notes that I've written over the past few months that I'm now speaking to a custom GPT with, which is more fun than talking with myself at this point, actually. So there's that myth. Now, is it true that people generally tend to end up on more and more medications as they have more and more episodes over time, like episodes of mania or depression, whatever? Yeah, that tends to happen. But for me, last year, I'll just share a little story. I decided I was going to try one more time to taper off medications. Long story short, didn't work. I ended up in depression for a few months. And right now, I only have a GP who prescribes me meds every 6 months. Like that's my contact with the system. And I was going to go see a psychiatrist. I was going to be able to get in. And I knew that they were just going to change my medication, want to put me on more or something. I'm like, So I canceled the appointment. I canceled another appointment. I'm like, I'm just going to get through this and I'm going to end up on the exact same meds I've been on for 11 years, 12 years, 13 years, whatever. And I did get through it and I didn't need a change, So had they wanted to put me on something stronger or something, just start playing around with it and prolong the depression that I went through, whatever. And the thing too with Reuncovery is that because I have this system of tracking everything that I'm doing, all the different projects, as soon as the depression started to lift, which actually started to happen when I went off an extra medication I was on that I don't usually take, the night I didn't take any, the next day I was fine. So I might have prolonged it a little because of the medication. But anyway, I was immediately back to all the projects I was doing before because I track it, because I honor it, I receive it, I accept it. And that leads to another myth, like if you start a bunch of projects and you don't finish them, it's a sign of illness. Well, actually, I think it's a sign of needing to have a tracking system. So then one knows when to engage with it. And when one isn't engaging with it, then how to get back to it. So yeah, that's another thing. And yeah, I think part of my theory, my hypothesis, if I had a lab and I could test this, I think that a lot of the cognitive decline is because we're not taught to learn from each episode. We're not taught to go back and look at the things we wrote down and re-encode them in our brain in real time by reading them, writing about them, whatever. And so the seeds of what came through never grow any fruit. And so if you imagine that each episode or each iteration is an attempt to get some kind of messages through or learnings or understand one's possibilities or capabilities, and then it's not received or it's not engaged with, each attempt is trying to do the same thing instead of get to the next stage of learning. So for me, I learn new things every time. And then if I'm faced with a similar thing, it's not scary or difficult because I've learned about it. So I think it's actually a failure by numbing out with medication and just saying it's all illness and doesn't make any sense, it's chaos, it's meaningless. That's the sad part, right, to me. And, and also about people who have this, I feel that in my experience, because I was part of a community, the people that I've met are the kindest and very attuned to kindness. So yeah, some of those myths as well don't land for me.
This is sort of bringing up some stuff. So at my last job, I worked with people experiencing homelessness, and I worked a lot with people, who experience mania or have a diagnosis of like schizophrenia or bipolar. And it's really fucking sad to like talk to these people who are like, yeah, I want to talk to a therapist, but all she does is shoot me down and say, no, I can't go to the spiritual realm in my sleep, or no, I can't, like, I'm not an arm of God or whatever. And so these people like don't, not that like, they need help or whatever, but like they just don't feel they have anybody to talk to because they just get shot down and like put in this box of mental illness. And there was this one client that I had, oh my God, like the first time I met them, I didn't really believe in like spiritual energy or like being able to read other people's energy. But I met that person and they like immediately, like within 5 seconds, read my entire like life history. And like as like they could just had this amazing ability to read people and like just this connection to like the earth. And it blew my mind. Just my worldview totally changed meeting this person. And then I don't want to like give away too many details, but like essentially this person got arrested for being loud and yelling because they were dealing with, whatever was going on in their head and it made other people uncomfortable. And then it turned into this whole ordeal where they were stuck in jail, and I was going to every single aid and assist hearing because they had to keep rescheduling it because they were like, oh, this person's probably on drugs. We're still waiting for them to come down. We don't know what's wrong with them. And all this person wanted was to just exist in nature. That is, like, they wanted human connection and to just be able to live in the woods and get their needs met. And I had to watch this person get like run through the system, and it just really fucked me up for a while because I just, I saw what this person wanted for their life and their, beautiful insights and powers, for lack of a better word. And to just watch this person get medicated to like the highest doses. And, luckily they're working on themselves and they're trying to get back to where they want to be. But yeah, it was something that really stuck with me. So thank you for sharing, for letting me ramble about that.
Well, it's a beautiful story, and I agree. Like if I think about myself, or I think I've thought about it this way before, where people who have a mental illness label and agree to take the meds and agree to recover and agree to do this and agree to do that, and get numbed out and, participate in society at Starbucks job or something like that, they're, given a little bit of maybe a monthly amount of money to live on, or they're given reduced cost housing or all these things, right? But if you take a step further and there's those individuals who don't actually want those types of interactions or interventions, then they don't have housing. Then they manifest as homeless people or people without homes. But really, I would say in my experience, some of them are even closer to nature than, say, myself, like the type of beingness that some of them are. And I'm just generalizing. Like there's a spectrum of gifts and skills and talents and superpowers that in my current exploration, I think maps quite well to the right brain and how humans in general don't really access their right brain. And just to say one more thing about that is in studying Dr. Ian McGilchrist's work, he actually says that the right brain isn't just a brain, it's actually a world that is actually real and there, but we don't experience it, right? So in my view, the people who end up oppressed, marginalized, pushed to the edges, start manifesting as crazy or, not able to live in the structures of society, they belong to the more right brain shifted world. And in that world, they're actually beautiful, sparkling, shiny people.
Yeah, in your book, you quoted Tiffany Greenwood, positive traits in the bipolar spectrum, the space between madness and genius. And some of those traits were spirituality, empathy, creativity, realism, and resilience. And yeah, I'm tired of looking everything in the, negative light. Like I think I mentioned to you when I first reached out, I got my bipolar diagnosis and I used that as sort of like, oh, this is an explanation for the way that I am, and these are the therapies that I need to use, and these are the steps I need to take to mask all of these things about myself. But then, oh shit, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, and then I got a hold of your book and started doing peer support work, and I was like, oh, maybe yes, there are parts of like psychiatry. Like I also take medication. I played the game of trying to reduce them or get off of them, and it never ends well. But just knowing that like I am my diagnosis and I am also not my diagnosis. Like the parts of it, and I don't want to like speak for everybody, like everybody's experience is different and however they identify with it is valid. But like after reading your book, you know, and going through all of this, it's like I am bipolar and those are parts of me. And like, yes, I do things sometimes that like I regret, but you know, that's that's just the way it is. And you know, I can do what I can to, you know, make amends if I fuck up or whatever, but yeah, just the acceptance has really helped. So, thank you for this book.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm gonna go ahead and start to wrap up. First, before I ask like closing questions, I just wanted to give you space to share anything, if there's any thoughts that have come to mind while we've been talking, or anything else you wanted to touch on that we missed.
It's hard to put into words, but yeah, the book that I wrote was intended to give people permission to explore their own meanings that have come through, you know, and get into a flow of that. And in order to do that, I shared a bunch of the meanings that had come through me. But it doesn't mean that that's what it means to somebody else with bipolar per se. Like, I envisioned people seeing something that maybe resonated and riffing off of that or adding to that in their own directions in ways like where that book could almost turn into a book based on each sentence filled in by other people. You know what I mean? That's just one example. But yeah, I've said all these things, but I don't pretend to know what the experience is like for other people. And that's why I just have a process of exploring and sharing a lot of my experiences within myself. And that exploration and that learning and that understanding and that adapting is what has been important. It's the learning and the understanding and adapting that's important, not the specific content.
So we talked a little bit about CBT. I was kind of in the same boat. I tried it, wasn't really for me. I know it helps other people. And then we also talked about medications. And aside from obviously reading this book, are there any other tools or resources that come to mind to aid people in their re-uncovery journey?
For me, the most important aspect of treatment is how I treat myself and how I treat the meanings that come through. And, you know, to me, if I don't learn from my experiences and be curious and have wonder and awe, not all the time, just as possible states, then I'm mistreating myself. And, you know, I have tapered off medications for a few months at a time successfully with like a micronutrient approach, but I wasn't able to sustain it. So, you know, for me, meaning is the best treatment, and having lots of it, in my experience, I feel like it helps mitigate side effects as well as makes the recovery or trying to fit into the world much easier. And I did have a psychiatrist try to taper me up to high dose long-term antipsychotic maintenance treatment, and that was really terrible. But what helped with that is after that fifth hospitalization, I refused to go back, and I got through the next 5 or 6 episodes that I had over the years by myself without going to the hospital. So even something that's bad treatment can turn out to be learning and motivation and something really good. But what's mostly helpful is the psychosocial clubhouse model and supported housing and things like that. It was really great to have that community. And yeah, for me, I like to have my own space, and that really helps.
Andrea, thank you so much for coming on the show. I cannot emphasize enough how glad I am that you came on. It's always like nerve-wracking reaching out to like specific people like authors or musicians because I'm like, oh, worst case they're just not going to respond. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. If people want to check out more of your work, how can they go about doing that?
Before I forget, I just want to say yes, thank you for having me. When I got your email, it super made my day. And I could have almost missed it because I didn't recognize your name, like I didn't know you, but I didn't miss it. And yeah, just so happy to meet you. And connecting with what I'm doing now, I'm pretty active on Substack, and it's Bipolar Game Changer News, I think, right now. And I also have a link tree, which is Bipolar Game Changer. That is where I have some of the different projects and creative things that I've done. And I wouldn't say like I'm super good at crafting things. I'm kind of a drafter, learner person, but I'm not really great with those finishing touches. Hopefully, I'll co-create with someone one day who does have that. Like, I'm not going to try to do the things I know my brain's not designed to do at this point in my life. And of course, I wrote The Bipolar Game Changer, and I have a few other books on Amazon that are only ebook version. And I'm also in the process of releasing kind of a beta version of a chat. So you were mentioning that, there's nobody to talk to about this sort of stuff. And this chat, AI chat, you can talk about these meanings that come through and it will reflect something back to you. So it's only in a beta version. So I'm not sure how great it is at this point, but I've tested it out and it seems pretty good. So that will be released through my Substack. Actually, at this point, it might be released. And I'm also in the process of starting up a nonprofit around re-uncovery. And the goal is to have these tools available for people as well as, well, what happened was when I found out about medical assistance in dying being legalized in Canada, they tried to do it in 2024. It really rocked my world. And so my hope is that these tools will start to bring in the conversation of human potential and possibilities and meaning, and that we really do have something to offer. And perhaps some of it came through, or clues to it came through in Extraordinary States. And in moving that way, there's a less likelihood that a person will die by MAID. And that wasn't the intention when I was forming it, but with that news, I realized that what I've been creating all along is coming together at a very timely timely time. Yeah. So those are the things that I'm working on, and I'm also posting on the Substack some dialogues I'm having with my custom GPT, which is a little bit different than the one that I'm releasing. And I think it's kind of interesting.
Nice. Well, I will be sure to include links in the show notes so people can check all of that out. Andrea, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth. It was really a joy and an honor.
Before we wrap up today's episode and I share that song with you, I wanted to remind you that I have a Patreon, patreon.com/talkingshitabout, where for $5 a month you can get weekly exclusive or bonus content and a shout out on the show for joining. So again, patreon.com/talkingshitabout. Okay. So listening to this voicemail before this interview, I only listened to it every few years. It was very much viewed through the illness lens. Like, this is madness, and none of this makes sense, and, yes, I have his voice, but it's not him. After this conversation, listening to the voicemail while I was editing the episode, I had to, take a pause for a day or two because I got to listen to it through a whole new lens of, yes, the stuff about Bermuda or Aruba being millionaires, probably not totally grounded in our reality, but the things he says about me and my brothers and himself, being gifted, being these kind people, being intelligent people, there's truth in that. And it hit really hard in a good way. So I wanted to leave the voicemail at the end because I wanted you to hopefully listen to it through that lens as well, not just some of this is crazy, but there's truth in there. So without further ado, here's an ode to those in need. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey, it's your dad. I love you. I miss you. I need you and your brother and your mom together, and I need a time when I can call you. You just became a millionaire overnight, Elizabeth, you and Joe. I've been working on something for 2 months, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. Well, we're incorporated, and you and Joe own 20% of the business at peace. Okay, and you're going to run it in 5 years after I'm gone, when I retire, okay? I'm going to tell you all about it. Right now, I have 7 companies. We're going to have 8 here this afternoon, and we're worth $10 million right now. And next year, fiscal year 2014, we worth $30 million. 2015, $60 million. You get it? Just double the number. Keep on going. 5 years, I'm done. I'm just going to take $1 million this year, and I'll take $3 million the next year. I'll do the same. I'll double. Then I'll take 6. Then I'll take 12. Get it? Then I'm done. And if it's your guys' company by then, you're probably going to have 25, 30 companies. You two, I'm going to teach you business school. You probably some stuff you don't know about me. My psychiatrist told me I'm one of the most intelligent people on the planet. That my IQ is higher than Ted Turner's. And if he doesn't take his meds, he gets all fucked up too. But your dad's fucking a genius. I just came up with the ingenious plan to work 5% of the time and to be a family 90% of the time. We're millionaires overnight. Aruba's our cash cow. It's $500,000 a month. So we need to get it set up. I got 50 cars and trucks and Jeeps ready to ship. So we don't have all ready to ship. That's why I need Joe. I need to set you guys up in Aruba. We're going to go in a week or two. We're going to get a couple houses down there. And then we're getting a little rental property for the business. And we're going to licenses, and you kids are going to run it. And I'm going to help get you guys all set up. And OJ, my business partner, is going to be down there with you, okay? So I've got it all planned out. I'm 20 steps ahead. That's your man. Remember my motto? Call it good, call me not. You're pretty little. I just make it happen. That's all I do. Just make shit happen. It's easy. That's the business mind. I'm a mastermind. I'm an indigo child. And you're something too. We all need to get together. We're all gifted, all of us. That's why I need to find my real mother and see if I have brothers and sisters. Because I know my gift. It's the most gifted is all. I figured it out. God told me last night what my plan is and what to do, and I'm going to tell you guys. It's amazing what just happened. And anyway, his intelligence level is 4 times greater than mine. When he's 11 years old, he'll have the intelligence of me at 45. Does that make sense? 4 times fucking smarter than I am. Joe is twice as smart as I am. And I don't know. We gotta talk about you. You're gifted. I know for you it's gotta be something real. You're such a loving, caring person. And we gotta find out what each of us are gifted. All of us are. We're gonna find out what that gift is. You're such a loving, caring person. And we're gonna work on it together. I'm opening up an institute at the mental health facility in Colorado Springs where I went and was last treated. The nicest place I've ever been to. They've got a couple sections of the building in art and youth. I want to open a Christian gifted children's center where families can bring their children. And what happens to us, I always thought I was weird or different. I'm just smarter than most people. And I like perfection. And I didn't have it because I didn't have a mother. So that's why I always had girlfriends. I know everything about me now. I know my destiny. I know who I am. I know everything. I set you guys up